The narcissist's final meltdown, when they can't control you anymore. Welcome back to the mechanics of toxic relationships. There is a moment after months, sometimes years of confusion where the whole fucking thing suddenly becomes clear, not because they finally admit what they have done, not because you get the apology, not because some magical therapist appears with a clipboard and says, "Oh, congratulations, mate, you were right all along." No. It happens because you stop reacting, you stop explaining, you stop defending yourself, you stop trying to convince someone who has spent years deliberately misunderstanding you. And suddenly the person standing in front of you changes. The mask doesn't just slip. The bastard hits the floor. And for the first time, you get a proper look at the machinery underneath. That is when things can get very fucking interesting. Because as long as you were confused, emotional, explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying harder, apologizing for shit you didn't do, and desperately trying to get the relationship back to some imaginary good place, they still had control. You were still plugged into the system, but when you finally see the pattern, when you stop providing the reaction, when you genuinely stop giving a fuck whether they approve of you, now we have a problem. Not your problem. Theirs. Because you are no longer functioning as a reliable source of validation, attention, drama, reassurance, admiration, or emotional reaction. Worse than that, you can see them. And narcissistic behavior works beautifully when nobody can see the fucking wiring. Once you know where the wires go, the magic trick gets considerably less impressive. Today we're talking about what happens when a narcissistic person realizes they can no longer control you. The projection, the escalation, the smear campaign, the sudden disappearance, and why what looks like their final victory can actually be the moment the entire system finally loses power. Let's get into it. The problem: the engine starts eating itself. First, we need to clear something up. When people hear narcissistic meltdown, they often imagine some spectacular movie scene: screaming, doors slamming, a wine glass hitting the wall, someone standing in the rain yelling, "You'll never find anyone like me." And sometimes, yeah, you might get the full fucking theater production, but collapse does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is rage, sometimes it is contempt, sometimes it is crying, sometimes it is complete silence, sometimes it is rewriting your entire relationship for an audience you didn't even know existed. The important part is not what it looks like. The important part is what triggered it: loss of control. Because a person operating from strong narcissistic defenses often depends heavily on external regulation. They need other people to confirm the version of themselves they need to believe. Good person, victim, special, desirable, misunderstood, superior, the one who always gets treated badly. Whatever version they are running, other people become supporting actors in that production. And for a long time you had a role. You might have been the rescuer, the provider, the apologizer, the emotional punching bag, the person who reassured them, the person who absorbed every shitty mood and somehow ended up apologizing for causing it. You were basically unpaid emotional roadside assistance, 3 a.m, engine blown, transmission hanging out, smoke everywhere. And there you are saying, maybe if I communicate more calmly, mate, the fucking wheels are gone. Communication is no longer the problem, but when you stop performing that role, something destabilizes, because suddenly the old buttons do nothing. Silent treatment, you go make a coffee. Jealousy bait, you don't bite. Blame, you don't defend yourself. A dramatic threat to leave, you hold the door open. And that last one is particularly confusing because for years, "I'm leaving," used to trigger, "No, please, let's work this out." Now it gets, "Righto, keys are on the bench." System error. Because the behavior that used to produce emotional movement in you is no longer producing anything. And that loss of influence can create what is often described as narcissistic injury. Basically, reality has scratched the paint on a self-image that was never particularly well bonded to the panel underneath. And instead of repairing the underlying damage, they start attacking the person holding the inspection light. That brings us to stage 1. Stage 1, projection. the fault is apparently yours. Projection is one of the strangest parts of these relationships, because once you finally see it, some of the accusations become almost fucking comical. They lie when you're dishonest, they manipulate, you're controlling, they manufacture chaos, you love drama, they cheat, you're paranoid and jealous, they spend 3 days giving you the silent treatment, you refuse to communicate. It is like catching someone standing beside a burning building, holding a petrol can, while they point at you and yell, "Look what you did." And because you have been conditioned to examine yourself constantly, you actually stop and think, "Fuck, did I?" That is the trap. Projection shifts unbearable material away from them and onto you. If they can make you carry the accusation, they don't have to examine the behavior. And the clever part is that your defense becomes evidence. You're controlling. No, I'm not. When have I controlled you? See, you always argue. What the fuck are you supposed to do with that? Nothing? That is the answer. You stop attending court cases where the prosecutor, judge, and witness are all the same person, because defending yourself inside a rigged conversation only gives the conversation more oxygen, and your reaction tells them something important. They can still move you. That is what matters, not whether the accusation makes sense. The accusation might be completely fucking ridiculous, but if they can get your heart rate up, get you typing paragraphs, get you trying to prove reality, access confirmed, ignition on, system responding. So when projection stops working, something else usually needs to happen, and this is where things can get ugly. Stage 2, the smear campaign. Once they can no longer reliably control your perception of them, they may start trying to control everyone else's perception of you. Welcome to the public relations department. Suddenly the person who spent years telling you, "I don't like people knowing our private business," has apparently launched a fucking podcast tour. Everybody knows everything. Well, their version of everything are mutual friends, family, co-workers, neighbors, the bloke who serviced their washing machine in 2019. Everyone gets a press release, and naturally they are the victim. You are unstable, you are abusive, you changed, you are impossible to live with. They tried everything. They gave you chance after chance, and they may conveniently leave out 5 years of provocation, gaslighting, stonewalling, manipulation, and chaos. But they remember that one time you finally cracked and yelled. Funny that. 5 years of context disappears. One reaction gets remastered in 4K, director's cut, Dolby Atmos, now available on fucking Netflix. This is why smear campaigns can be so psychologically brutal, because they are not just attacking what happened, they are attacking your credibility. If they can establish themselves as the victim first, then anything you say afterwards can be framed as retaliation. That is narrative control. And one of the hardest things for decent people to understand is this: you cannot out-explain a committed liar to an audience committed to believing them. You will destroy yourself trying. You will want to correct every detail, send screenshots, explain timelines, tell everybody what really happened. And sometimes, particularly where legal, workplace, or safety issues are involved, documentation absolutely matters. Keep messages, keep emails, keep dates, keep records. Facts are useful, but emotionally, do not spend your life running around putting out every fire somebody else lights, because some people will believe nonsense without ever asking you a single question. That tells you something useful about them too. Real friends ask. Real friends know your character. Real friends don't receive one dramatic story and suddenly decide you became Satan last Tuesday. And the smear campaign often gets louder when you become quieter, because now they are trying to create externally what they can no longer create inside you. Control. But if even that does not drag you back into the fight, now we hit the strangest stage. The disappearing act, stage 3, they suddenly vanish. This one fucks with people, because after all the intensity, all the accusations, the rage, the blame, the threats, the constant messages, the obsession, suddenly nothing, silence. They vanish, and your brain goes, "What the fuck just happened? Did they suddenly stop caring? Was I actually the problem? Did they finally move on? Did they win?" No. Sometimes what you are witnessing is simply the moment the old system becomes unproductive. Think about it. For months or years, they pressed buttons and got responses. Push here. Argument. Push there. Reassurance. Threaten abandonment. Panic. Withdraw affection. Pursuit. Accuse you. Defense. Cry. Rescue. Rage. Submission. The dashboard worked perfectly. Then one day, nothing. They press the button. No light. Press another. Nothing. Kick the dash. Still nothing. At some point, even an idiot realizes the battery has been disconnected, and that is what emotional detachment does. You become unavailable for manipulation. Not because you have won some psychological chess match, not because you have become colder than them, because you finally stopped playing. Grey rock can sometimes help in situations where contact is unavoidable, brief, neutral, factual, no emotional hooks, no essays, no courtroom closing statements, no 17-paragraph text explaining why they hurt you, because they already know there was conflict. You are not providing new engineering data, you are feeding the machine. And once there is no supply, no argument, no admiration, no panic, no pursuit, and no emotional movement, remaining around you can become deeply uncomfortable. Because you are now a mirror they cannot edit, you know too much. You have seen the pattern, their excuses no longer work, their emotional tricks no longer produce the old result, and perhaps worst of all, you are calm. That can be intolerable to someone who built their sense of influence around your emotional reaction, so they disappear, sometimes straight into another relationship, and this can sting like hell. You spent years trying to build something, they disappear 2 weeks later. Living my best life? New partner. Sunset? Matching fucking linen shirts, and you think, was I nothing? No, do not confuse replacement with healing. People who cannot tolerate internal discomfort often seek external regulation quickly. New person, new validation, new audience, new version of themselves. Same unresolved machinery. They did not rebuild the engine, they changed the driver, the final control move. Now here is something important. Silence itself can also become a final attempt at control. They may disappear hoping you chase, because imagine the validation in that. After everything they did, you are still the one asking, can we talk? Why are you ignoring me? Can I just get some closure? That restores the hierarchy. They are wanted, you are pursuing, control is back online. This is why closure can be such a dangerous obsession. You keep thinking closure is something they have in their pocket, like they can finally hand you the missing piece and suddenly the last 5 years will make sense. They don't have it. Closure is often the moment you stop needing an explanation from the person who created the confusion. That is fucking freedom. What their silence really means? If somebody disappears after losing the ability to manipulate you, stop interpreting their absence as proof that you are worthless. Look at what changed. You stopped reacting. You stopped rescuing. You stopped arguing. You stopped carrying their emotional regulation for them. And suddenly the relationship could not function. That tells you something. You were providing far more stability than you realized. You were not necessarily creating the dysfunction. You may have been absorbing it, covering it, compensating for it. You were the zip tie holding the exhaust on, the duct tape around the radiator hose, the bloke saying, yeah, she'll be right. She was not fucking right. You were simply keeping the thing moving, and when you stopped, everything shook loose. That does not make their collapse your responsibility. It reveals how much of the relationship depended on your willingness to keep carrying the weight. The recovery shift, this is where recovery starts becoming less about understanding them and more about reclaiming yourself. Because there is a stage where learning about narcissism is incredibly useful and you discover gaslighting, projection, trauma bonding, intermittent reinforcement, smear campaigns, hoovering, and suddenly years of confusion have names. That is powerful, but eventually you need to stop studying the wreck. You already know why it crashed. At some point you have to climb out and start walking. No contact, where safe and possible, is not a punishment. It is not revenge. It is not designed to make them miss you. If you are using no contact hoping they suffer, you are still emotionally connected to their reaction. No contact is for you. It removes the stimulus. It gives your nervous system time to stop waiting for the next explosion. It lets your perception rebuild. without someone constantly telling you what you saw didn't happen. And if contact is unavoidable because of children, work, property, legal matters, or other practical reasons, keep it boring, factual, necessary, professional. Basically communicate like you are dealing with a difficult insurance company. No emotion, no autobiography. No. I just want you to understand how much you hurt me. They have already demonstrated what they do with vulnerable information. Stop handing them ammunition and being surprised when you hear gunshots. The brutal truth. Here is the brutal truth. Their final meltdown is not your victory because they are suffering. Their disappearance is not your victory because they lost. Your victory is the moment their behavior stops determining your internal state. That is the goal. Not revenge, not humiliation, not proving they are a narcissist to everybody in town, not waiting for karma to hit them with a bus. Although, let's be honest, occasionally we would all like to see karma at least clip the fucking wing mirror. But real recovery is quieter than revenge. It is waking up and realizing you haven't checked their social media. It is seeing their name and feeling nothing. It is hearing another ridiculous story they're telling about you and thinking, yeah, sounds about right. Then going back to your coffee. That is power, because for years they may have controlled the emotional atmosphere. Now they don't even control your Tuesday afternoon. The mechanic's view, think of the entire relationship like a badly maintained car. For years warning lights were coming on. You kept clearing the codes. Argument, clear code. Silent treatment, clear code. Cheating suspicion, clear code. Gaslighting, clear code. You were not fixing the fault. You were keeping the vehicle operational because you desperately wanted to believe the engine was basically good. Then one day you stopped clearing the codes, and holy shit, the dash lights up like a fucking Christmas tree. A BS engine, airbag, transmission, oil pressure. Probably a warning light you've never even seen before. And they look at the dashboard and blame the mechanic. But you didn't create the faults. You just stopped hiding them. That is what happens when you finally stop compensating for dysfunction. The machine reveals its actual condition, and sometimes the correct diagnosis is not needs more patience, or it is uneconomical to repair. Write the bastard off. Final line, you did not destroy them by leaving. You simply stopped being the part that kept their broken system running. And when the whole fucking thing finally shook itself apart, that wasn't proof you failed. It was proof you had been holding it together far longer than you ever should have. Their version of you no longer gets to run your life. Their accusations don't define you. Their smear campaign doesn't define you, and their silence doesn't define you. And their disappearance isn't abandonment. Sometimes it is simply the sound a machine makes when you finally pull the fucking plug. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, you do not have to keep repairing something that keeps trying to destroy the mechanic.